Oh well. Karma's a bitch.
Hey y'all, hey everyone, and welcome back. So in this video I'm going to show you all how I created this adorable Soot Sprite from Spirited Away, which is a Miyazaki film, and I believe they show up in a couple other of his films, but this is the one I know them most in. And yeah, if you all want to see how I put together this costume, and in general how to make a mascot costume, and also by the way, if you don't know that I make mascot costumes secretly, now you do. So yeah, so I want to show you all how I created this. And if you want to learn, keep on watching, and also don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. So you're going to need quite a few of materials, and so first thing, you're going to need a 36-inch balloon, which I will leave down below to where I got it, and an air pump for blowing the balloon, and then you're going to need your mixture of flour and water for the paper mache, and of course a tarp, because paper mache is very messy, very, very messy. And then you're going to need some newspaper, but not this excessive amount, but like half of that. And then some craft paper for our patterns that we'll be making. And then a heavy duty, what's this called? Exacto knife for our foam cutting. And you're going to need 2 large rectangles of 2-inch upholstery foam, which I will also link down below to where I got it. And then of course your marker for marking out the patterns. And then you'll also need some spray 90 and weldwood contact cement. A lot of people use barge cement, but this is actually cheaper and it works just as well. But yeah, work in a well ventilated area because this smells like poison and death. So yeah, and then of course protection in terms of gloves and your mask. You're also going to need 2.5 to 3 yards of faux fur fabric, preferably 3 yards. So I don't know what these are called, but these are kind of like mesh squares that I found in the yarn and craft aisle. So you'll need 2 whites and 1 black for your eyes, and you're going to need some E6000 glue as well as hot glue for later. And so to start, we're going to have to pump some air into this balloon and literally spend half a century trying to make this as big as possible, but not close to popping because that is the worst. So yeah, definitely get it as large as possible, but do not use your own oxygen for you will pass out. And then just go ahead and tie it off. And yeah, hold on to this joint because this is slippery. Anyway, so now I'm going to just haphazardly pour in my flour into my water and make this kind of pancake batter consistency. And yes, this is what it looks like. This is super gross. I do not like paper mache whatsoever. You can just tell by my really upset face. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear the newspaper into strips. And we're going to use these strips as our base. Wow, Noli. Anyway, so you get the point. I'm just going to dip these joints into my paper mache mixture and then just sloppily slap that onto the balloon. And this is how we're going to make our patterns. You'll see later. I'm just essentially gonna, cover this entire balloon and just get it to the point where it's completely covered, and then when it hardens and dries, we're gonna pop this joint and then rip it open and make patterns. So anyway, so this is what it should look like after it's all done. You're gonna let that joint dry overnight, and then in the morning it should be hard as a rock, hopefully. So yeah, once you kind of know it's dry, just go ahead and find a basketball or online a picture of a basketball, because we want to draw these lines that basically put together a basketball. So we're gonna just mimic that using our Sharpie and then just drawing. I'm starting with the horizontal line that cuts the basketball in half. And then after I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and draw on the other kind of wonky looking pieces. And as you can see, I didn't really cover all of my balloon up. You can kind of still see that there's white, but you'll see what I do to make sure everything is symmetrical and the same size later. Basically having to just use the same pieces for the bottom half, since I made the top half a little too large. So you'll see what I mean later. But yeah, so I drew the horizontal line and then the vertical line that cuts it in half, and then from there I'm just copying, really ugly, but you kind of get the point. Just copying the shapes that make up the basketball. And so once you get this really ugly looking shape, we're going to go ahead and carefully take a little pin. And I don't like the sound of large balloons popping or balloons popping in general. So I just kind of hold it. But it ended up popping and scaring the hell out of me anyway, so I was just so unhappy at that point. But yeah, so now what I'm doing is I'm just taking my scissors and cutting off the excess. So as you can see, I only use about half of the balloon. If you can get the whole part, that's awesome, but even so, I would say just go ahead and cover like as much as possible, but really the half of the balloon is you know, sufficient enough, because we'll just be doubling up the pieces and mirroring those later for the bottom half. So as you can see, I am just cutting the pieces out, and then I'm also making sure that I'm writing, which you should do before you pop it and like cut it. But just make sure you label everything and also create notches so that when we create our final you know, pattern pieces, we know where everything fits together. We know which part is like center left, center right, and then, you know, far left, far right. So I just went ahead and took the time to do that, and then also top left, bottom left, things like that. So make sure every time you're transferring a pattern onto something, you are labeling that piece so you know where it goes. And I'm just flattening, yes, the pattern, just so that we can transfer that onto paper. So now we're gonna go ahead and take our craft paper, and we're just gonna you'll definitely need 2 of these because these are really large patterns. I got these at the dollar store for, of course, $1. And courtesy of the USPS store, I got these little boxes just to help me hold down the paper. And now I'm gonna just take my pattern pieces and I'm gonna go ahead and trace them. Now I wanted them to be even larger because I really wanted this to be as big as possible. So I actually, you know, trace like leaving about 2 inches all around to make these as large as possible. So you can also keep it at the same size, but depending on what you're making, if you want something really large, just go ahead and give it more seam allowance space, you know, as much as you can fit within the paper. But just also be aware of how big your foam is and how many pieces you're going to need. And so now I'm taking those same pieces and I'm flipping them around. The same pieces that I just made, I'm flipping them around, and then I'm making the opposite ends. So I just made the top left and the center left, and now I'm going to flip it over and make the top right and the center right. So yeah, and I labeled it top far right and top center right. So yeah, and then I'm going to do that again, but this time I'm going to actually flip them upside down and over. So you can like, y'all, if whatever helps you like figure this out the best, like you can use all the pieces that you made and just kind of like, you know, flip them around. But essentially you just want, you know, flipped sides, so you have a left and a right, and when you're doing the bottom and the top, you just want to make sure you flip it upside down, and just kind of use that basketball pattern to make sure you have the pieces correct, because this can get really confusing very easily. But again, I'm just laying out my previous pieces and flipping them to the side to get the left side and the right side, and then flipping them upside down and over to get the bottom. So now we're going to go ahead and take our upholstery foam, and you should have 8 pieces or 8 pattern pieces in the end. So I hope that all made sense, because I know I talk a lot, y'all, but you kind of get the idea. So long as you just follow the basketball pattern, it just makes so much more sense when you have a diagram. But what I'm doing is I'm laying a piece of foam. So I have 2 of these big pieces. I'm laying them down and laying my patterns over top of them, and then I just went ahead and pinned everything. And I'm using my Sharpie just to trace around the perimeter, and I'm not leaving any seam allowance with this since I already, you know, made it large enough. And I'm gonna go ahead and transfer all the information from the pattern onto the foam, so I know exactly, again, where the pieces are going to be and what pieces they need to connect to. And so now I'm going to take my extreme excessive exacto knife. This is perfect for foam cutting, so you can find this at Home Depot, which I found it at. And then you're just going to carefully cut the pieces out and make sure you're always cutting away from you and away from your fingers and your body, because this can be really scary if it, yeah, just don't do that. So go ahead and do that for the bottom pieces. And if it helps y'all, I got 50 inches by 72. So it's 6 feet long and then 50 inches wide, and it was perfect, the perfect size for all 4 you know, of my pattern pieces, and then getting 2 allowed me to make 8. So yeah, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna stick these joints together, and we're gonna make sure we're prepared with our gloves and our mask and our spray 90 and our weld wood contact cement. And please don't make fun of me for my ugly ass pants, but yeah, this is what they look like. So now, of course, we're going to start off with our spray 90, and you can see I'm working outside in a well-ventilated area, and I'm just using the spray 90 all along the edges of my foam pieces. And so whichever pieces you're starting off with, make sure you are spraying and gluing the sides on both pieces. So as you can see, I'm spraying both sides that are going to be contacted together. So on one piece I'm spraying one side, and then the other piece I'm spraying the other side that's going to be stuck to the other one. And then after I spray it, I immediately glue, or you know, add the weld wood glue on there, and then I let that dry for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to apply another coat and then let that dry. And then yeah, don't do what I did, because I worked inside because it was really cold outside and I was just really miserable. But once you have, you know, your glue and your spray on both pieces, and make sure you have 2 layers of that and let it dry. This actually works a whole lot easier the longer you let it dry before you stick it together, because otherwise you're just going to be really unhappy as you're sticking this joint together. But also just ask for help, because doing this by yourself is really not fun. So it took a long time of wrestling to get these 2 pieces to stick together. And as you can see, I stuck my top, I started with my center right stuck to my, you know, center left, my top center left and top center right stuck together. And then I added the far left pieces and the far right pieces and all of that. And then also use some wire if you have it, just to help with, like, you know, holding the pieces down, especially if you're working by yourself. This will just kind of allow the glue to like really settle, especially in the areas like the corners that are a little bit more, you know, trickier. So here I am gluing the pieces. So I have my top far right connected to my center, my top center right, and then now I'm going to go ahead and just use the wire just to kind of get that secured together. And so that's what it looks like. So yeah, still struggling, but yeah, this definitely helps. The wire definitely kind of helps to at least keep it together while you're trying your best to, you know, piece it together. And so you're going to let that completely dry overnight. And so this is what I'm showing you. So yeah, centers are connected to each other, and then make sure the lefts are connected to the lefts and the rights are connected to the rights, as you can see. And now what we're going to do is, after this has completely dried overnight, we're going to turn it inside out and make sure both pieces are turned inside out. So yes, please ignore the white man in this video. He's irrelevant. Hi, Steve. Anyway, so as I'm FaceTiming him, I am going ahead and cutting off the excess of the foam at the bottom, just to kind of, you know, I made it a little too big and a little too excessively big, so I'm just cutting off the bottom, just a little bit of both the bottom and the top. And now I'm gonna go ahead and draw out my eyeballs on my top piece, and then take my really large and really scary exacto knife, and I'm gonna cut out the eyes on that. And you can make your own little pattern pieces for the eyes if you're not comfortable with making circles. So yeah. So afterwards, I just go ahead and I shave everything down, and now I have my eye holes. And I kind of test it out to make sure I can see. Now I'm going to put the top piece on top of the bottom piece, and then just match them up so that I can draw out my armholes. And we're going to go ahead and just cut the foam out. And cutting foam, y'all, is like the most therapeutic kind of, I don't know, I just really enjoy cutting foam, and I got really carried away. But anyway, so I'm also going to cut out a hole on the bottom, so how this will allow me to slip the costume on. And now for the fun part. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same pattern pieces and do the same thing I did to the foam to my fur. And I just laid all of the pattern pieces out. And luckily, so this is 2 yards, you'll see. So definitely get like 3 yards just to help you out. And then I pin everything down, and then I'm taking my chalk, and now I'm actually adding about an inch, I believe, yeah, about an inch of seam allowance all around, just because I don't want it to be too tight to make it too hard to like put the fur over top of the foam. So that seam allowance, that extra seam allowance, will allow you to kind of slip it on easier. And so once you have your 8 pieces cut out, you're going to go ahead and, of course, yes, cut them out. And again, y'all, always make sure you transfer the labels so you know where everything is going and what is connected to what. And so now I'm going to be connecting my pieces together. So just the same way I connected my foam is the same way I'm going to connect my fur fabric, but it's going to be 10 times easier because we're just sewing this joint. So make sure your front or your right sides are facing each other, and you're going to start off with your center pieces. So your bottom center right and your bottom center left, make sure they're facing each other, the right side, and then just sew along that curved edge. So you can see bottom center right. Now I'm going to connect that to my bottom far right, just the same way I did with my foam, and then just go ahead and pin that along the edge. And if you do happen to run into the issue where I had a little bit too much fabric, like for some reason they didn't match up like quite perfectly, I just kind of like ruffled it in and then just pinned it. So like fold over the edges just a little bit just to make sure it fit. So do what you got to do. That's all I'm saying. And so you're going to repeat the process until you have two pieces, your top and your bottom piece. And then you're just going to put that over top of your foam pieces and make sure you match your seams up so that everything fits just perfectly. And let me say this, y'all, my floor hasn't been the same since, because this is just a very messy project. So rest in peace, floor. So once we have that complete, what we're going to do is we're going to cut out our eye holes as well as our armholes and the hole for where our body will go through. And I just start out by puncturing little holes. Then I'm going to cut away at it to create these little triangular flaps. And we're going to fold those in later and glue them down so that it creates a nice clean edge and finish for our eyes and all the other holes and stuff. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm cutting them into like little triangular shapes. And then later we're going to take our hot glue, aka now we're going to take our hot glue and just glue those joints back. And yeah, you're going to need a lot of hot glue. I forgot to mention that in the beginning, but lots of hot glue, y'all, because this is a lot of fur. And sometimes it doesn't always stick to the foam. Don't know why, but just give it a couple more layers and it should be fine. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to match up our top and bottom piece. And this is the cheat sheet, y'all. We don't actually, we're not actually attaching the foam together at all, because I was going to do that, but I was just really like, nah, I'm tired. So what I actually did, and this worked out perfectly, I just attached it to the fur. So because we had cut down our foam pieces a little bit in that beginning, it allowed the fur to be longer than the foam, and therefore I just went ahead and, you know, connected the fur together and just sewed them shut, and you don't even see the seams because the fur just takes over. So yeah, I'm just going around and taking a curved needle. So you can find this at like Sally's Beauty Supply. This is used for like weaves and things like that. And I'm just, you know, sewing this shut, letters together by the fur. And so now we're going to take our little mesh panels, and we're going to start off with our main eyeballs, and then we're going to do the pupils later. And so I just take like a, you know, random piece of foam that I cut out from the eyes just to kind of give me a circular guide. And then I decide on that, and then I go ahead and transfer to that second mesh panel. So I have my 2 eyeballs. And now I'm just going to take like a jar of, you know, something to use for a guide for the circular shape of our pupils. And then once I decide on that, I just transfer it to my second piece of mesh. And to attach everything together, what I'm taking is my E6000. And I actually went back and hot glued this again, just because the E6000 didn't really take to a lot of the fur for some reason. But what I did was I just E6000'd it in place, and then I also used straight pins just to hold that in place and let that dry overnight. And then when I went back in with the hot glue, I also hot glued the pupils, and then went back in and hot glued around the eyeballs later. And this is the finished product. So I hope you all enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making this. If you have ideas for future projects and costumes, let me know in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I love you all. See you soon. Bye.